make sure, you know, that when our citizens
They got it back to where she's supposed to
they
be.
get to use that money. And then I have a process for it. And every year I can't compare.
How come we got a big computer screen in front of us, we can't see the audience?
Sure.
I can still turn it on, and then later on it'll be up in the air.
And they can hurl stuff at us without us seeing it come.
Yeah, lob it over.
That's for a nice height behind the speaker.
I think it was November, December of last year. I know it was November.
Well, I read through all of this and almost every word of everything.
everything. For you, it's, you know.
No, that's what that did for me, though.
And then we did it at the beginning of this year so that they have the whole year to spend it. So it'll be reflected in the March financial statements.
Is it hooked up? It is.
Sure.
Oh, it is?
Oh, it's not on, it's locked.
What's that? It's not hooked up. You still need to get it ready?
It's 6:30.
Is it?
Yeah. My computer thinks
I
it
got a
is.
half a minute yet. It's got power.
Is it?
It's got power. No, my computer says it's 5:30. My watch is slow.
5:30, I should say, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's call the meeting to order. This is the Bella Vista City Council work session for April 17, 2023. We're going to go a little bit out of order today. The very first thing we're going to do is the last discussion item, which is Kim Hall is going to talk about the financial statement. Take it away.
Give me just a second to set up your, the machine went to sleep on me and I'm hoping you guys don't, okay?
If you keep it lively, we'll be fine.
If I keep it what?
Lively?
Yeah. Well, I found my spelling error, my gratuitous spelling error, so you will be disappointed to know that you won't. Fingers crossed you won't find one.
There we go.
Technology is a beautiful thing when it works.
Right.
You guys might have a little challenge to, a little further on, things are going to get a little smaller. So at some point you may want to, that's why there's chairs back there in case you want to come towards the center. So, I just wanted to take a moment and present the goal of this session is how do the financial statements, how do we navigate them, and what are we doing, and how to make informed, efficient, effective evaluations of financial information. As a reminder, our monthly financial statements are unaudited. We yearly present an audited financial statement to the council by our auditors. Okay? So these are all unaudited. The 1231s are unaudited until they're blessed by the auditors. Okay? And why now? Well, it's a new year, a new council, and I thought it was the perfect time because I had some changes, updates I wanted to make. So I thought this would be a good time to talk about them. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about navigating the balance sheet. This is the balance sheet the way you've seen it in the February statements that we just sent out, okay? This is the balance sheet as I've updated. You know, it's a little more compact, right? It looks very, very similar, but it's just a little more compact. Where it's compact is restricted, fund balance. Okay, fact is that that's not necessary to run the city. So it's just extra information on a financial statement, and most financial statements don't record that on a monthly basis. So I just compacted those. Restricted funds are funds that are legally required to be spent in certain ways. And then the other thing I compacted is assigned. As we've discussed in here before, assigned is mostly donations. You don't need to know who has what on a monthly basis because it changes by material amounts. It's just not, we're monitoring that for you guys.
So the new one, you have distributed a copy like that?
No,
right? Okay.
no. This is March will be your first month that you will see this new updated format.
So assigned and unassigned, those are administratively directed? Or department heads and the
Exactly.
mayor?
Assigned is, and we'll talk about this in just one second, but assigned is indeed, council directs it, right? Restricted is it's legally directed. All right, so somebody has, you have a resolution that basically says impact fees can only be spent on certain items. And so that's what the restricted, so the legally restricted grants fall in that category, okay? So here's a little tip, and this is a good tip for any balance sheet you ever look at. The first thing you want to know is there enough cash to pay accounts payable? And in our financial statements in February, you can see there's $10 million in cash. And our accounts payable is 278. So yes, we have plenty of cash to pay our accounts payable. Now, it does present, keep in mind, the moment I say this, people go crazy and they say, oh yay, we're flush with cash. Today, we're flush with cash. We have commitments throughout the year, okay? The other thing that this puts an onus on me, and that is, I have started, because now we have interest rates that actually pay interest. They're not zero anymore. Doug? So we have gone through and we have started moving money into funds to earn some revenue for the city. Just a little FYI, what are other assets? Other assets are those investments that I was talking to you about. So you'll see that other assets grows through the year, compared to last year, other assets is significantly higher, okay? And that's not on here, but when you get the financial statements, you'll see that they're significantly higher than last year because we are now trying to earn interest. And we are using, our method currently is very short term to 3, 6, 9, 12 months, okay? Trying to maximize our interest, but keep money available for the significant amount of capital improvements that we've got on our agenda. All right, there's also a couple of other miscellaneous accounts receivable in there, small little things, so that's why it's other assets and not investments. So, okay, and then back to the question we just talked about, restricted is legally restricted. Assigned is an example of assigned is donations, right? Unassigned is if they're not restricted or assigned, they're available funds. So I wanted to talk about this particular thing on the financial statements that is on there right now. It's a metric, and what the metric does is it gives us a look at what the current unassigned fund balance is compared to the next year revenue, or to the current year revenue, all right? Now, the reason this number is not one that is particularly meaningful to run the city is because it doesn't tell you about the commitments that are required by the budget that you guys approved. And it's not, our expenditures and our use of cash is not on a regular monthly basis. It's on a calendar basis. A capital project, where's the chief? doesn't happen when we think it's going to happen. It can be delayed by months or years, right? So we have those commitments. When you do that on a monthly basis, it's not particularly meaningful. You have to have a hard stop of a number. So every year we go through an exercise at year end, and Doug and I were just talking about this, where we look to see at year end what the unassigned balance is, and that's the funds that are available for us to determine our capital expenditures. So that's the number that we want. This other metric I'm going to remove from the financial statements this year. The more important number, I just have to smile because Doug came up and asked me about this just a few minutes ago before this started. And that is the more important number is on the monthly financial statements, you're going to see this unbudgeted or non-budgeted requests that come in from monthly, i.e. the plumbing that we had last month. So we take what we think is the unassigned fund balance after all of our capital requests, what's left over, right? And then we deduct those things, and now we have $400,000 in unbudgeted. Those are things that were not budgeted last year in our budget process, and so we now have about $661,000 left. Okay, so that's the more important piece of information that you want to look at. If we spend more than $662,000 by the end of the year, more, right, then we will be dipping into our reserves. That's why I say we have to think, yes, we have $10 million in cash, but technically speaking, only $1 million of that is available. Okay. Any questions? By the way, if you have questions, you can just, hop in and ask. Okay, navigating the income statement. This is the current income statement, and it's broken down into operating and restricted. And again, what do we know about restricted? Restricted is legally required. And your department heads and I am going to be looking at what is restricted and making sure that those funds are spent in accordance with the restrictions. All right, so that's not really important information for monitoring the financial statements. What you want to look at is you want to look at the operating revenues, the operating expenditures. Okay, and in this case, what I would look at is when I put this together, the first thing I did was I was like, oh, what's going on with property tax revenue? That's a negative $464,000. And then I went, no big deal. Look where we were last year. We were at 97 in February. We're at 106 this year. So we know that revenues, property tax specifically, are not regular and consistent throughout the month. Throughout the year. What do? They have their own, they're all due and payable in April, is that right? Do I have that right? April?
October.
Okay. So they have to be in-house by October 15th. So I think we get a bump in April, and I think we get a bump in October. I don't know why we get a bump in April, but
Personal
bills go out.
property is October.
Okay.
Some people pay the bills immediately and some wait till October.
Okay. I'm probably waiting until October. Anyway, so the first thing you want to do is you want to say, okay, yeah, so, compared to budget, there's a little, really? So you want to take it one step further. Does this, anybody have questions about this? Makes sense, right? So then, here's one of our expenditures, and our expenditures has got a lot of information on it. So it has operating, and it has capital, it has debt services, and it has transfers, okay? But what do you really need to focus on? You want to focus on the operating, because that's how we run this city, right? So in this case, we don't have anything that's negative as a group. We don't have, none of the departments have negative items, okay? But if it did, the next thing you would do is you would look and you would see what it was the prior year. So in this case, I thought it was really interesting. Look how close admin, HR, and IT is between the 2 years at the end of February. I was like, what are the chances of that happen? That's like $200. So you kind of want to look at both. It's not just the one or the other.
I just have a question. How come we budgeted so much over for 2023 versus 2022? And we did that on several of those, on several lines.
Well, that, it would, let's talk about that offline, because that's a long conversation, because we went through the budget process, right? And I don't want to take up everybody's time, because I know you guys have all these wonderful ordinances to talk about. And, but I'd be happy to sit down with you and go through that. So that's basically the income and the balance sheet. And so the other thing on the financial statements that you guys get, it's always interesting, is to look at our sales tax, okay? To look at the sales tax and what the sales tax is happening. Now, look at the January number per city. Isn't that interesting? Because when you look at January's numbers, you're looking at November sales. So this was an interesting month for me, because our December number was, our January number is slightly down from last year.
But that's really November data.
Correct. So Black Friday's in November. So I would have expected to see that equal to or more.
Yes.
But we know that there's things going on in the economy that may have hit that, except look at the county number for January. The county number is over. Do you see my point? That really, so to me, I went, there's nothing significant going on there. Because then you look at the February number, and I suspect that the state had a little hiccup or something, and that they corrected, right? Because they from time to time, they might have an adjustment. So you want to look at, like, is more than 1 month, is it 2 months, is it budget to actual versus the prior year? You need to look at all of that as together. Okay, so last slide. Impact fees. These are unbudgeted. We don't budget them, we don't run them through the income statement. Why? Because we don't run the city using impact fees. So the decision was made to leave them as a balance sheet item. So every month I go put them as a liability to keep them out of the income statement. Okay, so nobody thinks that we're inflating our revenue. And then the thing to keep in mind is impact fees require a resolution to spend. Okay, so you guys are going to know if they spend. But here's why I think this is a key performance indicator. And that is because impact fees are about building homes here, and we know that a significant portion of our economy in Bella Vista at this point in time is dependent on the continued building of homes. And so if this number were to have a problem, this would be my concern, because other things would follow. I expected to see slight reduction because then raising interest rates, right? That's what I expected, but we're not seeing it yet. I don't know where we'll be later, but those are the kind of questions. I expected it to see a little down here, but it hasn't been. So I hope that was helpful. Does anybody have any other? Yes, sir?
You talked about building in Bella Vista. We have about 600 homes or whatever. Any material that's delivered, purchased anywhere around, in-state, out-of-state, in the neighborhood, or out of Bella Vista itself, any sales tax, because the products and materials are delivered here should be charged and we should be credited for those. Is there any way to validate in some fashion or another
Well,
whether we're getting our fair share of those?
So we've had, there have been many conversations across this country about, what's that code called? Is it an SIC code? I think it's an SIC code. I think that's what it is. But, you know, businesses fall under a code and they report their income based on this code, right?
Oh, the government identification for businesses?
The
Yes.
state does all that, so when they fill out a form, they say what their general business is, category-wise, and what they've collected, and then the state, Department of Finance and Administration is the one that collects it for us and remits it to us, and as far as I know, we have no way to audit that they're doing it correctly.
We do not. Then this is my point. We even talked about it at, I think you were there when they were talking about it at my first session of AML. And the reason being is that, like in Texas, I can tell you, I get a report that tells me that Lowe's paid this much to the city, right? And each business, I can drill down to the individual business level. That information is not available in Arkansas at all, and it's a pretty big deal. So we don't have the ability to look in to see if we're getting our fair share. What I can tell you, in between that and the fact that a lot of codes, you look at the list one day, you think you're this, you look at that list another day, you're going to go, oh no, I'm this. There is no consistent requirement that you pick a code and stay with a code. And so it's very difficult to even figure out what those codes really mean. It's very difficult. I did some analysis on that a couple of times last year, trying to make my best guesses. And finally, Doug and I were at a conference, and finally I agreed, and I just threw the whole thing out because it just could not. There was just the reliance on a number that doesn't necessarily make sense. And how do you group them together to find out? Because what I wanted to know is what percentage of our sales tax was dependent on homes. Not just necessarily internet homes or delivered to property, but what, you know, because we have T.H. Rogers, we have, and it was enough to make you just pull your hair out and go crazy, because it was so inconsistent. But that's a good question. Yeah, if you want to lobby for something, and I know AML has lobbied again and again and again to get that information released to taxpayers.
I don't know that it necessarily needs to be distributed to the public, but it should be
correct.
available to the cities.
You're absolutely right.
Information like other information you collect from businesses.
I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. Even in Texas, it's not available to the taxpayer. What happens is I have to sign a confidentiality agreement, right? And that information cannot be shared with the public. So you're right. But it should be available on some level, so we can do that sort of analysis, but it's not here. That's a good question. Any other? I wanted to get this first because I knew you guys, this was exciting stuff, and I didn't want you to have to listen to. Pardon?
Only doing the copy.
Hey.
Well, thanks a lot, Kim. I do think it's helpful to give people some tips about the exact things to look at, a balance sheet, income statement, and whatnot. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And these things will, by the way, not just city financials. These are kind of important, any financials that you look at.
Okay. Well, thank you.
One last thing. On a year-to-year basis, if we went back to last year and looked at the January report, what it would show for revenue in January would have been October or November of the last year as well. I mean, those are consistent from year to year to year.
Okay, so is it all right if I talk about that?
If you're fast.
Okay, I'll be fast. So you got an updated financial statement for February. So the mayor believes, and I'm completely neutral on this, but believes that he wanted you to be able to take the February statement this year compared to the February statement last year for that very reason. So the last set of financial statements you got have February to February. The first ones, you could only compare January to January. You couldn't compare February to February. But it showed you a difference. So going forward, we're going to hold the financials until the end of the month. So February sales tax does not get here until, I'm sorry, March sales tax does not get here until April 25th. So you will get the March financial statements in May. So that is, I started to put that, and then I thought, I put it in an email to you, so if you, by the way, I think everybody's getting those emails now. So if you have any questions or, problems getting your email, please just let me know.
And it'll be early May.
Yes, I would imagine it'll be, it'll be before the meetings, that's for sure. It'll be before your work sessions.
Yeah, so really right now, as we're sitting here, we have end of February statement. And next month we'll have end of March. And if you don't have that time lag, the problem is your expenses will all be fine, but your revenue won't be any good. Because this is the city and county sales tax you're not showing.
Yep.
And particularly since we're making them available to the public, I didn't want to put out a statement that's completely inaccurate, which basically is what it is if you don't weigh it. It's not sort of inaccurate, it's completely inaccurate on the revenue side, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, let's start on the agenda. Ordinance A, waiving the requirements of formal competitive bidding and authorizing the contract with Superior Automotive Group in the total amount of $74,570 for the purchase of two 2023 Dodge Charger police vehicles for use by the police department. I noticed in the materials that this is a replacement of existing. So anybody have any questions for the chief? Okay. Item B, ordinance B, amending section 28.1 sewer connections required of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Bella Vista to require a sanitary sewer connection when service becomes available within 100 feet of a house lot or adjoining lot and for other purposes. This was put forth by myself, and in a prior month I had mentioned or suggested an ordinance that would be within 100 feet. It did two different things. So with 100 feet in any direction, which is what the village wastewater asked for. Right now it says 100 feet in the front yard. And there's people where the sewer is right in their backyard or their side yard, because our streets are so unusual. And it had two parts. That was one part. And the other part was the 30 years, if it's 30 years old. And, I had the sense council said, hey, we've got to talk about this. And I thought the first part, the 100 feet, was kind of non-controversial. So that's why I brought that back with just the 100 feet. It still has that, you can't tell by reading this, but it still has the same rule in it, that it's only when the house is sold.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
This doesn't amend 28-2, which is the next section, which
Gotcha.
has the exception.
So all this is the 100 feet.
Mayor, do we know how many new feet of sewer line they put in the last 12, 18, or 24 months?
I don't have that at my fingertips, no. So
They were, the last I had spoken with them about a year ago, they were doing some modifications in their system by changing where things were routed to give them certain capacity, which allowed them to do more expansion on the Cooper Road area.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, how much is new? Not repaired, rebuilt, refixed, whatever. How much is new from 12, 18, 24 months?
Could we ask that?
I'm sure we'll have to ask and find out. I'm just something.
yeah,
It'd be nice to know if there's anything new, or these guys are just, moving right along.
Could we ask the mayor to contact them and see if they could give
Anybody can do
us
it.
some kind of a report?
Anybody can do it. It's
Well-
just gotta go up and doors, how much?
So that way it's official, you know?
You're an official, why don't we go up and
Yeah.
ask them, worst they're gonna do is say, stick it.
Well, I'd be happy to talk to him. I have met with him one time recently. But we do have a discussion item later in the meeting about possibly having a committee, so why don't we wait for that and see where that goes. Okay, ordinance C, amending the Bella Vista zoning ordinance and map to rezone property described in rezoning petition number 2023-48097, county parcel number 16-2110900 from P1 Conservation District to C1 Neighborhood Commercial District. And I believe this is is this in the Metfield area, Tom?
Yes, it is.
Is it the cart barn? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Larry.
I have a question to help us figure out easily on these things without the formality of the parcel number and the project petition number in planning. Could we have something that says AKA the Metfield Clubhouse or AKA Reardon Hall or something like that in the title or somewhere's on here?
Well,
Is that possible?
you can put a street address, that's typically what you see commonly, and put a street number on there. In the packet, this picture and of course the legal description itself is not very helpful, just meets and bounds, but I will do it however it needs to be done, but
I'm just thinking.
not all properties are going to have a name, they're
Yeah.
not. I don't want to say McDonald's, or some, I don't want to, this is how it's normally done.
I understand,
I know how to do it. I'm not saying legally there's not another way to do it, but this is a legal document and it needs to, sometimes it's just a little difficult, but that's why we had this meeting, so Taylor could come right in and say, hey, this is the clubhouse. So it's kind of what I would like for us to do that at this meeting.
Could we then put it in our agenda here as in a parenthesis, AKA Metfield Clubhouse or Reardon Hall or whatever to help? It makes it easier for us to figure it out.
There's no law
And
that
the
says
public.
you can't. The city clerk is sitting right here and she puts together that agenda, so.
I'm just wondering, it would help the public out a little bit to find out where they're from, where they are.
Anything different we do will confuse the public. I'll say that. But it doesn't mean that we can't do something different that could also be helpful.
In the minutes, Mayor Flynn will say, this is commonly known as.
Right.
And I do put that in the minutes, but you're saying you would like it.
I'm thinking maybe at the end of the announcement in the agenda, just in the parentheses that says here's where it's at,
But
kind of.
they're not all properties are known as something. They could be vacant lot.
Right. They might be a vacant lot
And so
or
then
undeveloped
everyone will call and say,
or.
why doesn't this one say what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be dozens and dozens of phone calls.
Well, then you just say it's an undeveloped piece of land.
I know, but it will prompt questions. That's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doug's staff would, get a lot of phone calls, and they may not mind that. I'm just,
Yeah, I'm thinking about our job making it easier rather than making theirs more difficult, not making theirs more difficult.
I'm more than happy to put a common street address on it, commonly known as 123 Main Street. We can do that, we can put a street address on
If there is one, yeah.
it.
Would that be part of the title that I'm reading if you did that, or?
I can make it that way.
I've just been making notes in here for the POA things, because there's usually things you are familiar with. I've just been making my own note.
When you read the planning analysis of the request, they tell you in there where it is, so it is available.
It's all in, every bit of it is.
I know.
It's
It's
all
all-
looking right there, all of it. A picture of it, the address of it, the name of it, the applicant, everything.
Okay, thanks for this suggestion. D is an ordinance amending the Bella Vista zoning ordinance and map to rezone property described in rezoning petition number 2023-48171 and county parcel so-and-so from R1 residential single-family district to C1 neighborhood commercial district. And I believe this is Reardon Hall. So this is kind of how the other POA, is there any questions about it? Okay, next one is E, amending the Bella Vista zoning ordinance and map to rezone property described in rezoning petition number 2023-48174 from R1 residential single family to C1 neighborhood commercial district. And this is described as the Reardon Hall, the playground.
Is just immediately to the west of Reardon Hall.
Yeah. Okay. Next one is F, a resolution approving the mayor's appointment of Gina Porter to Bella Vista Arts Council for a 3-year term ending April 22, 2026. And we did just get a description of her background and put it in there. I don't think it was in the packet. Were those handed out? Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, I thought you might find that helpful. You know, there's just 3 people on the Bella Vista Arts Council. So, but she looks like she's extremely qualified. Next one's a resolution approving the mayor's appointment of Elizabeth Duncan to position 5 on the Tree Advisory Board for a 3-year term ending May 1, 2026. And her background is on there also. It appears to be very relevant. Any questions? Okay. Next one is approving the mayor's appointment of Graham Edwards to position 4 on the Tree Advisory Board for a 3-year term ending May 1, 2026. And I believe this is a reappointment. Okay. Next one, I, resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to enter into a contract with Garrett Excavating, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $1.2 million for asphalt street resurfacing hot mix overlay. And I think there was some attachments showing about the bidding. Did you want to elaborate on this, Karen?
Part of our annual resurfacing budget. This is the hot mix portion of it. This year we're looking to do 9.3 miles. We got a low bid from Garrett Excavating at $106.55 per ton, which is less than we were expecting since most things have been going up in the economy. So we were really thankful for that bid. Just kind of put it to the best use.
What do you know about this company? I mean,
so they're formerly known as Deco. They just did a name change last year. So they've bid previously year after year after year. They're one of our regular
Deco
bidders.
was a competitor mostly in the private sector largely,
Correct.
but now they're going out to the public.
Yes, and we've had them before on our city projects.
Do they have their own hot mix plants? Or do they buy stuff?
Yes, they do.
They do? Okay. Because I wasn't aware of how they got their asphalt, so.
Yes. Formerly known as Deco.
So the 1.2 million, using my prodigious math skills, I divided by 9.3 miles, and it's about 130 grand a mile, in case anybody's interested.
Is that a lane mile or is that a 2-lane mile?
It's the full
When
width.
you say
of the street.
9.3, that you're talking
That's
about
the
2
full
lanes.
width, yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're 18, sometimes they're 20.
130,000 mile. And that's, I mean, that's not the way they bid it.
No, but that's what it ends up.
Yeah, and that's lower than it was last year, so.
Well, the bid, I think their bid is below what we had last year.
We had
Yeah.
120, 150 per ton last year.
You know, it's driven a lot by the price of oil, so it's a wildly dangerous metric. It could be anything next year, literally.
It's been a couple of years. I came in and talked to Mike and asked him about the price of, the asphalt, price of slurry, right? And he did some kind of back of the envelope numbers to, just kind of give a rough estimate. And at the time, it could have been 3 years. I don't think it was. Time goes by so fast. It was like $60,000 a mile. So, and now it's about 130, so it's doubled in the last couple, 3 years. Is that right?
Apparently, yeah.
Since COVID, yeah.
I always felt when I was on that street committee, we were really fortunate because there were a number of years where it was right around, I remember 70 grand a mile. And it really stayed low it's kind of like interest rates. It stayed low for a long time and you kept thinking our luck's going to run out someday, and it did. Actually, I just looked at my notes. I had 134,000 actually a mile.
When the U.S. was petroleum independent, the rates were cheaper. For a fact.
Yeah. Anyway, appreciate.
Hey, one last thing. So when was it last month? And I congratulated you on your new position, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, were you replacing Mike at that point?
I was the assistant at that point.
And now,
Superintendent.
you're the superintendent and run the streets department.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Big job. Congratulations. That's really awesome. I've known Karen for 6 years since I've been on council, and I've never felt to be impressed. I mean, you guys are really all over what you do.
Yeah.
So that is wonderful. And your partner back here,
Yes, Dan Downing, he's our assistant superintendent.
assistant superintendent, so he's
As well.
new in his position as well. So congratulations to both
Yeah.
of you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was remiss. I wanted to mention that Mike Button had retired March 31. He was real low-key about it, didn't want to party or anything like that. And so everyone may not have heard about it. And Karen was appointed to superintendent, and Dan Downing was appointed the assistant superintendent. He's been a real hands-on guy, has been a head foreman for a number of years. So, you always hate to lose an experienced guy, and I thought Mike really was knowledgeable. But I feel really good about these two.
Yeah, they come
But
from within. You guys,
yeah.
you know Bella Vista, you understand it. So I think it's a great move. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Okay.
And one of the few women in that position,
Yes,
right?
thank you.
Okay, Resolution J, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to enter into amendment number 1 to the contract with Height Jackson Associates, PA, in the amount of $49,350 related to large-scale development requirements for the street department wash bay. You want to maybe give a brief description of this project?
So for several years, the city's been trying to get a car wash bay for all of the city to use. And this year, it's finally got approved. And so it's going to be just behind the public safety facility between our two departments. And we got an estimate from the architect engineer in the amount of $33,160. We signed that contract in February of this year. But it didn't include the cost for the large-scale development. And that was probably a little bit of my misunderstanding on it. So originally, the car wash was on the street facilities, large-scale development, but it was us and future, which meant that it had to start within 6 months for us to do that. Then it was included on the public safety facility buildings, but also as proposed or future, which meant the drainage calculations weren't included in that. So this amendment is to include that large-scale development.
For the planning required in order to get approval from our planning department for permits and things, right? Okay.
Community development has agreed to administratively review the large-scale development as a cost saving. So as long as there's no waivers or variances on that, so that should be a cost savings for the city. I know this 16,000 additional hurts, but they're going to try to help us save money on that end as well.
So that was non-budgeted.
Oh, we have a budget for it. I just wasn't expecting a large scale development.
Okay.
The amendment one.
I know it's budgeted for
Yes.
261,000.
Yes.
So this,
So that's an improved, but
pardon me?
this will go out to bid, and then we'll know what those building numbers are going to be.
Okay.
Yeah, so the deal was the extra 16 made it over 35,000, so then you need council's approval,
Yes.
so, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
One last question, will this be able to, as an example, wash your large dump trucks and fire trucks and all of those kinds of
I'm
things?
not sure, I think the fire might watch separately, but it's going to be large enough for our dump trucks and equipment to certainly go
Okay.
through. I don't see why a fire truck couldn't, but I don't know the measurements.
Yeah, I'm using that maybe as a false example because they do a lot of polishing, spit polishing of those things in the fire
They
department
do,
itself,
they look
so.
fantastic, so we're hoping. it
But
can-
in the event that they wanted to run it through for salt or something in the wintertime, that would be an easy way to do
Right,
that.
our dump trucks and equipment will fit in that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the other thing a lot of people maybe don't realize about the street department is they have mechanics that repair all the vehicles. So having that wash over there kind of makes some sense.
Yeah.
I personally am very impressed by a mechanic who can work on all these different vehicles we have, because they're not, a lot of them are very dissimilar, so.
So the police department will be able to keep their vehicles clean in the wintertime when they are all salty and
As
things?
long as we are not below freezing, at that point, it's kind of recommended that.
Yeah,
protect the
right,
equipment.
yeah.
Yeah.
On the fire department, Larry, the new facilities have specific runoff items to deal with the soap and whatnot and washing the vehicles. That's part of the DEQ permit they have to get on the new fire station. We installed one at City Hall, Civic Station, and all your other places. So they're equipped to wash vehicles on their own at the station, or with all the environmental things you have to do.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, that leaves just discussion items, and as you know, we started with one of the discussion items. The first one is setting up street and wastewater septic committees. That's something I think came up the other month during one of the meetings. So, I guess we could take them one at a time.
Yeah, correct. So basically we talked about this last meeting briefly about maybe restarting the street committee, and then because we have a kind of wastewater septic issue at hand, maybe having committee to kind of start focusing and thinking about that. I think Craig might have mentioned at that meeting that he had some interest in that sort of part of it, but I don't know how you start forming these or how this goes, the process is, but I figured if we don't start talking about it, it won't happen, so.
Yeah, well, it's an easy process because they're very much of ad hoc committees.
Love it.
And I will tell you, on the street committee, when I saw this was on the agenda, I took the liberty of calling some of the citizens that were on it. And Lee Clark was on it. He said he'd like to still be on it. He's been on it, I think maybe as long as we've had it. The other person on it is the street committee, is Jimmy Foster, and he's here. He's sitting over there. He's been on it several years. He's from Plano and has I couldn't tell you exactly what his title was, but he has a background in running the city. And of course, Plano's 200,000 people, so they had a lot going on. Anyway, so he's been a big help on the committee. The third person who's on it is Richard Taylor, who ran in Ward 3. Mm-hmm. Well, those first two said, hey, yeah, I'd like to keep being on it. And Richard he said, I'm willing to still be on it, but if there's other people who want to do it, that's okay with me.
I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, yeah. We may reach out and figure out how we want to.
So we could get one or more people from council. And, one of the big things, what brought up this discussion was that idea about having the 14 miles of unpaved streets. That's with new houses on those streets. And in the interim, before we had anything going, I talked to the street people and said, let's try to do 2 miles a year. If you did that, it would take you 7 years to get through them, plus that's assuming there won't be new ones, which there will be. But she does have 2 miles on the thing she
That's
just gave us,
fantastic.
the 9.3 miles, so it's got 2 on it.
That's great news.
But that's a subject of great interest to people who live on them. As you can imagine, they build some nice house, and half the time the builder says, oh yeah, I'm sure the street will pave that next year or so, you know.
So streets committee, right? And then you're talking about septic, wastewater, whatever.
Yeah.
So are you thinking about 2 city council members on each one? Or are you talking about 1 city council member and some residents, citizens?
You can do it however you wanted. When I was on the streets committee, I purposely had just 1 councilman, so the meetings weren't public. But you can put 2 on if you like, and then just give a notice every time you meet. And I think the septic probably needs 2. That's a big,
Big undertaking.
yeah, big undertaking.
I would suggest that we make it a 5-man committee. You've got 3 suggestions here from the past that were on the committee along with you, John, and that you add 2 councilmen in the street committee, and that we create an ordinance that establishes that committee, provides an umbrella and oversight about what their authorities are and what their direction is. It would help us, I think, and it would help task that committee and the street superintendent in terms of where their authority or direction is to be, and how they relate to between that department and this council. So it would be an ordinance that would create the committee itself. 3 being appointed on a 3-year term or a 4-year term or whatever, and then the councilman.
We had a street committee right after we became the city. There may be something on the books already about it.
There may be.
So I need to look at that and see what it says. I tend to think, like the mayor said, it was sort of an ad hoc committee that really wasn't official as such, but it was referenced a lot like it was official. So I need to make sure we haven't already adopted something. It very well could be if we have adopted something, we just need to undo that so we can do what we want to do now.
Yeah.
It's not it doesn't keep us from doing what we want to do.
I don't know.
now. It does depend on how we do it moving forward.
I don't recall seeing in our ordinances anything about a street committee in there.
Well, it
Yeah.
could have been done as a resolution or something.
Okay.
There was
Yeah.
some time at the very beginning, they did a lot of stuff without any attorney or anything.
I'm thinking that would be a much better formality for us and would provide more involvement of the council on that committee by having 2 people over
I
there.
would just offer this to you and for you to think about. In my experience, it is very common that a city council would have a committee on streets or a committee on sewer or a public works committee along with something, committees of the council, not
Right.
outside members.
Right. Oh, not outside members.
You know, so if we're going to have something, and obviously it's a committee of the council, therefore the council ends up making the decisions. If we're talking about more of an ad hoc committee or of that nature, I guess they could obviously make a report to you like some of the other boards that we've created, and it's still going to be up to the full council what you want to do. You only have 1 member of the council on these. Of course, you do avoid the issue about the public notice and all of that. That can cut both ways.
Right. There's pros and cons.
Public perception of things. Just something else to think about. You do have committees of the council, they would have to be open to the public, of course, you know
Right.
that, so. Just some things to think about on that, and that applies both to street or sewer or septic issues. I think I would also add this. What is the goal of this? What do you want them to do? What is it? Because in my experience, whenever you create a board, the board feels like it has a duty to do something. And so, and then sometimes what authority the board has, if it's advisory in nature or whatever, it needs to be clear at the beginning to know that they really don't have a decision. I mean, they're advising, they're not deciding. And so, getting all that straight up front is very important.
You were on the city legal staff in Fayetteville.
Mm-hmm.
How are they organized in terms of the street and public works?
They had a street committee of the council, and
Is it more advisory, or is
I think
it?
they probably had a water and sewer. They had a water and sewer committee. They ran the utility through the city council. They didn't have an independent water works commission. And so those were, I get 3 members of the council. Of course, their council's bigger. They have a 7-member council, if I were.
It's 8,
8-member
yeah.
council. And 4 wards, 2 each. And so they would have, have an odd number of people for whatever you do. That way they can make a decision. They don't get stalemated with the type of.
Yeah, yeah.
But those are committees, and they have meetings and public notice, and the street committee may have the street superintendent or the head of the street department in to talk to the street committee about projects for next year, and whatever the council needs to know about the topic. So that's how committees work. You've never had council committees before, that I'm aware of, so.
Well, my thought is, I think it's better to be more informal, not have an ordinance. An example is what happened with the street committee. People they were taking a 1,000-foot road and somebody building one house at the end of it, and we were paving it. So Mike Button says this is a problem, and the mayor said this is a problem. So we made up a rule. It was the mayor's policy, the 150-foot rule, and I wrote it up. And then the mayor put it in as a policy, and we went by the 150-foot rule, and it was working really well. Actually, I liked it. Mike Button liked it. A couple of years ago, council decided they didn't like it, so they voted, no, we're not paving anything. We're not committing to pave even 1 foot. So that's what they've done since. The point is, we changed it, and we changed it a couple different times rather effortlessly, because we didn't have all this. Once you put all this formal ordinance stuff together, then it's hard to change things, do something different. I think it's better to be a little more flexible. We've got plenty of formality in the work sessions in the city council, and to have informal committees that actually accomplish things can be a good thing.
Work sessions should not be formal. I'll go ahead and say
Yeah,
that.
okay.
Work sessions are more of an informal type of discussion.
Yeah.
If you want to just put a group of people together and then report to the mayor occasionally, or have the mayor report to you, or the council member that's on it report to you or something, you can do those things informally, but we want a board, but we don't want a board, and we want, we need to decide what we want to, how we want to do it, I would say, and if it's important enough to set up a board, then set up a board. If it's not, and then you can still informally talk to people now without doing anything to create a board.
I do think roads are very important, but the septic to sewer is a very specific and challenging issue. I think it's by far the most important of the two right now. And I think the question is, which you guys did a pretty good job of raising, we talked about it before. There's 2 questions. How do we get more people on sewer in the short term? And how do we get more people on sewer in the long term?
And the answer is build more sewer.
Well, just to be clear, though, my directive was more towards the sewer septic issue, because that's a big concern to me looking down the road.
We just have a lot of fact finding to do first.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just a lot of questions that
Yeah.
you posed. And another part of it too, it's a septic part of it, and to me, I view that as an educational piece right now. What can we do short term, and then just ask some questions, is there anything we can really do long term, and try to understand what that might potentially be?
I can, not to intervene in the discussion which is yours to have, but, you're grasping in the dark. It's totally dark, and you're reaching around.
Yeah.
Get someone to give you information, get a study of some sort, get someone to feasibility or something someone to analyze the current situation. Look at how many septic tanks there are. Figure out how many miles of street have village wastewater on it.
That's what I'm talking about, Jason.
And then the council can, that's someone that would be outside. This committee was formulated, they're going to be well-meaning, but they're not going to be much more informed than you are on some of these issues. They're going to have to get information. So generally the first step, I think, whenever the city's going to break out into something new or different is what is defining the problem, and we don't even know if we can define the problem yet. We've got to figure out, we got to know what we're doing. And we don't know.
I just defined the problem. We need more people on sewer.
Okay. How many more? Over what period of time? How much?
You want to put them all on sewer tomorrow?
No.
Be it what method? Be it private sewer, be it a state sewer.
Well, I guess I was thinking this committee would, first thing they do would be engage in the fact-finding.
How big of a deal is it to move from an ad hoc committee to a more formal?
Write an ordinance to create the
Okay,
committee.
so we've had an ad hoc one to get some ground footing and then create.
Sure. I mean, this committee has no authority to do anything. Basically,
Correct.
it's going to be a member of the council and some dedicated people in the community interested in the issue. You want to call it a study committee or
An advisory, yeah.
defining what it is we need done, that's not being done, and then figuring out how to do it is better. So what is it we're trying to get done? And then how best do we do that? Is it a committee? Is it a council committee? What is it?
So the mayor could create what is it, a search committee or
What I'm trying to avoid, I've been around here a while, and I've seen it happen more than once. We go all into an issue with no clear endpoint of what, and we lose steam in it, and it just gets lost, and it just fizzles. And so I hate to see us do something like that on some of these important issues, because it's, I've said that.
Well, that was my point, was that if we could at least get some kind of engineering, just something to get us the groundwork, just to get an idea of what we're looking at moving forward. And that's the only thing that I was getting at the last time we talked about this.
I'd volunteer to work on that for one of the council members, but I think we should have more than one.
Why don't we invite the head of village wastewater to come to a work session? And if they're willing, because it's a private organization, they have no obligation to do so. To say, we've got a lot of questions about the future of sewer, and to talk to them about it and find out what's going on.
I have a question for our planning staff, CDS. Do we have a plan or a map from Village Wastewater that shows where their sewer system is, their collection system is, if you will?
No?
So we got nothing.
We got nothing.
I think they have a map.
What?
I think they have a map.
They have a map on GPS, or GIS. I know they have a map, but I just wondered if you guys had a copy of it. They are working with an engineer on mapping their system, so I know they have a map at least a year ago when I last talked with them.
They have not been real forthcoming about wanting to work with in the city or give any kind of info to the city. Is that not correct?
We don't know that, we haven't asked them.
I don't know if we've asked them, yeah, formally asked them.
No.
I know we approached them when we did the 2040 comprehensive plan, and I think hands were thrown up in the air and walked away.
Okay, I think we're going to ask some questions right now that a committee, if you want to call it that, or two council members, whoever you want it to be, to go out and ask those questions directly, because tonight we don't have those answers. That's what part of this
Yeah.
exploratory
This whole thing is all about.
would be, yes.
Yeah.
And we don't know enough to know what we don't know or what we do know right now. We need to go out and have some conversations, with people.
But I do know they have a map, and they
Yeah.
have it on GIS, and I think our consulting engineer, as the city engineer, Garver, would be able to take that document, digital document, and print things for us, overlay them in our system, like our street system and whatnot. I don't know that they are able to give us a map necessarily, other than their map of their system without streets underneath it. I don't think they have a base map of the city, unless they got one from the POA.
Who wants to do it?
We still need to go and get a hold of someone who knows what they're doing and do a study. And I mentioned that before, someone from the
Yes.
university or someplace, and make it a project for a class, either a graduating class or senior class, you know, pay money for other things, you know, dangle a little bit out. Let them come out here and do it as a project. You know, we would then get a basic idea of what we're looking at. And maybe even a basic idea of dollar-wise.
What you're suggesting is that we contact the U of A engineering department.
And ask them if they would
ask
do
if they would make it a
Well,
class project to
And I don't know
design
if
the
Crowder
sewers.
College used to have a course on that, and they're just up the street. I don't know if they still have it or not.
Who?
Crowder College.
Oh, and
They're just across the line anymore, and they'll let you know if they have it anymore. But, you know, we're looking for information, startup information, and we don't certainly have the expertise. So we hire people to do everything else. So let's, you know, a couple people go contact them. Those who would like to be on the committee, take a walk up there and see if Crowder does it, or get a hold of the university. You can probably do it through the community college instead of going all the way to Fayetteville, and see if they got something like that and what they think about it. Because how are we going to get the information otherwise? You're going to have to ask somebody.
Well, I'll take part in anything that needs to be done.
Yeah, and I would suggest, you know, not that I'm a short-term or anything, but those we put on the committee are going to be here a while. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel every couple of years. You know, someone who's going to be ongoing, because it's going to, this ain't happening overnight. So someone who's going to be ongoing, who's willing to shepherd it through, at least to some point where we can make that determination, point A, point B kind of thing.
The state has a lot of information through the health department on I mean, the gentleman that came and spoke to us 6-8 months ago when we were talking about short-term rentals, that person knows a lot. And it's probably got access to a lot of data that would be very.
Well, you know, they could be involved too.
you're talking about the septic systems?
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the discussion as well. Is where,
Yeah,
where
we're going to
they-
figure out both ways, because you're not going to get this whole place ever sewered, probably.
And they have part
Eventually.
of the licensing and the review of the sewer treatment facility that's in our city. And we don't know what they've got. We just, all we got to do is ask. And someone's got to have the technical knowledge to glean all that stuff and make some sense out of it, to figure out what the scope of the problem is, if there's a problem. I think there probably is, but the extent of it, timetables. Is it a 50-year problem? Is it a 10-year problem? Is it a 100-year problem? That tells you a lot.
Arkansas Department of Health has a plan review section for sewers and for water systems. And so they have district engineers, and we're District 1 up here in Northwest Arkansas. They have an engineer and a staff engineer and a environmental technician.
This isn't the kind of issue where we sit around and think, hey, I know a guy.
Right.
You don't do that. We need to have a degree of really thoughtful formality and review of this, because it's a big one. And you do it wrong, and this room will hold all people if you don't do it right. So I've talked enough, I'm sorry.
So do we have to appoint a group to do this, or do we just volunteer and get together and do it on our own?
You haven't had come to an agreement to do anything yet. You know, Larry, I know you're firmly behind an opinion, but there are other members of the council, and the council hasn't spoken on the issue yet. So put together your ad hoc committee, have them meet a few times, see what they say. But no, when it comes time to really start doing something, you're going to need to get more serious about it.
Well, someone that, from a citizen standpoint, that would, I think, is very interested in the sewer and septic is Daniel Ellis.
Oh, okay. It's good to know.
And Brent Steinspring is as well.
Who is?
Brent Steinspring, he was on the 2040, I think, committee, but he definitely expressed interest. Yes.
Springfield,
You
yeah, I
can
know.
call it sewer study committee.
Yeah, he was definitely interested in joining and working and helping.
Okay, that's good to know. The person in the audience here, Jimmy Foster, knows a lot about it and actually was on Village Wastewater Board for a short time. So, well, I could try to go ahead and put together a suggested committee. You guys have given me some great ideas. I think Larry needs to be on it from city council.
I think Craig was interested as well. Or big.
I'll be at whatever capacity the city needs me to be. But that's what I mean, is I'm just kind of sitting here absorbing everything. I don't really know a direction. I don't have any idea what needs to be done. I think this is one of those things we can kind of stew on.
Get information.
Yeah, just kind of get a direction before we, go feet first.
Yeah. If we have more than one council person on there, Attorney Kelly,
Public meeting.
we need a public meeting, but we could still have it as a, what would you call it, a search committee or whatever.
Call it whatever you call it. If
Yeah.
two council members on it are involved.
Everybody worries about a public meeting. All it takes is a phone call to tell them you're having one.
Yeah.
All it takes, and if
Yeah,
the man wants to
it's not
show
a
up,
big deal for me. It's a big deal for other people.
Yeah.
You're afraid to let the public know what you're doing? I mean,
No, I said it's not a big deal for me to let them know.
Everybody worries about, oh, you gotta have two guys. So what if you have two guys and you have public? You have one guy you don't, you have two guys you do. It's not a big deal.
So
But
you
it
know
seems
that-
like, for some people, it really is.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be.
You notify the clerk,
All it takes is
you
a
put
phone
the
call.
3-hour notice out there, so you gotta notify her at least 4 hours ahead of time to give her a little time to get things together. And, so,
It's simple.
or the
But
day
some people
before.
worry about it.
Yeah, right, yeah. It's not a big deal. It really isn't. Just a formality. You have to go through the hoops, right?
Okay, I'll go ahead and get something started, and I'll also talk to Frank tonight about coming to the work session next month, see if he's willing to do that.
That'd be great.
Okay, why don't we move along? Next one is citizen request for review of current parking ordinance.
Yeah, I know I met with the gentleman, I think Craig mentioned that he had as well, the citizen who was,
Oh, yeah.
the parking ordinance, and I know he came and a few other citizens who were also expressing interest as well, came and talked. I met them, I told them I didn't really care for a majority of what he was proposing, but that I'd bring it forward as a discussion item, and if anyone decided they wanted to really go forward after that, they could, but he's wanting to amend the, he gave us the packets last month.
He's the one that spoke to our council meeting?
Yes, and he had the package, yeah.
Yeah.
And basically he wants to propose that, instead of it being prohibited vehicles, which would be like RVs, trailers over 5x10, and other such vehicles would be allowed to park before the front of the house way without barrier, and could possibly pay a fee to the city, of permitting licensing. I had much reservation because of, in my head, it was the chicken situation where we can say, yes, it sounds great, let's vote and pass this because we want this, and the ACC has rules against it, which they do, it could put our citizens at a lawsuit.
I can speak to this very topic. I was here, and so toward the beginning of the city's existence, there was a decision to pass an ordinance that dealt with some of these. It was called parking, but really it was RVs in the yard. And, I mean, it's more than what a city typically think of as city parking, like meters and stuff like that. But we addressed that, and the reason the city addressed it was a very particular reason, and that was they wanted to adopt rules that mirrored what the covenant that the ACC required, and because the city wanted to take a more lead role in providing that type of enforcement action. The city was going to be the heavy when it came to that issue. And why that decision was made, I can't speak to it. Mayor Anderson and the council at the time and his discussion with them. So that's something the city should be more involved in because it's related to parking. And so the city adopted an ordinance that mirrored that rule. What people do not understand, and I'll try to explain, and people should understand it is confusing. for people that aren't trained in this area or in the law. So no disrespect intended to any of it. But we can make this legal all day and change the rules, and then the ACC person can knock on the door and start suing them and foreclosing on their house. We cannot make okay with the ACC just because we say there's an ordinance that says it's okay. And these people want to do stuff, the ACC is absolutely not wipe them out if they go ahead and do that. They're frustrated. I'll let them speak to their frustration on that. But the reason we have the rules we have is to mirror. And if we start making it different, they're going to think, hey, I can do it now, and they absolutely are not going to be able to do it.
Correct.
That's what's going to happen.
Look, so regardless of the ACC or not, right, I can tell you by and large, there's no stomach and there's no support for any type of an ordinance in the regard of what's been proposed to us. Just do little straw polls. I know a lot of people live, and I can tell you that there's not been one person that would be supportive of passing an ordinance that would allow closed-in trailers, boats, RVs to be parked forward of the front plane of the house.
Lawn care trailers.
At all. Lawn care trailers, it would involve every type of
Utility
vehicle, trailer, or anything. I mean, there's no restriction on size or anything, and there's just no stomach for it, by and large.
I've already received emails from citizens who were concerned about it, and also the gentleman also kind of like was feeling out things in different various social groups on social media, and there's a lot of commentary, and I would say just rough estimate, I've read probably a couple hundred comments, 90% were very much against any change in this as well, even if we didn't have the ACC situation against it too.
Well, I didn't physically meet with the gentleman. We had a phone conversation, but after that phone conversation, I spoke with Jason, and
I did as well.
Immediately extinguished any consideration.
It's not that we're necessarily reinforcing the POA rule, not the POA, the ACC rules. It's that there's no point in us adopting a rule that's contrary to what the ACC says
Putting our citizens at risk.
if it has meaningful and reasonable value.
You do, I mean, let me just be clear on this. There are parts of the city of Bella Vista that are not subject to the Bella
Right,
Vista
exactly.
covenants and declarations. So
Yeah.
those ACC rules don't apply to that, and the only rule that applies is our ordinance. But these are not those, look, I mean, the
Right.
people who are raising this issue
In town.
are in the area controlled by them.
And some of the non-POA land areas in the city are agriculturally zoned, and so they have different rules than does residential and commercial zoning. So all of that has an effect. One prime example is that the ACC prohibits any farm-type animal in your possession. The city code allows so many chickens, which means that non-POA property then can have chickens, or if they're agricultural, can have ag animals. So all of that is, a whole different scenario.
But aside from the ACC, majority of people aren't for this anyway, so.
The ones I've read, like,
Let me just throw this out, and it's got nothing to do with what we're doing, okay? But ACC was originally put together to be our building code folks. We didn't have it, the county approved it, okay? So we got to be a city, and we built our own rules based on whatever else. ACC book is about the 8th thing. Now they enforce 3 things. Everything else they ignore, to let us do it. So why are we worried about these 3 things? It's the same principle as in the covenants. POA is going to do streets, fire, and police. The day we came to city, the city did police, fire, and streets. And we get no reimbursement from the POA because we're doing their job. It's like we're picking and choosing what we want to play with.
Well, the opposite.
And maybe take a test case like this trailer thing, or maybe a white fence thing, and take a test case and see just what ACC is going to do.
What I was going to say is that we've got the opposite situation when it comes to signs. We have the proliferation of political signs in the yards and residences. Covenants do not allow that at all. And they've taken a policy, the ACC, of basically not enforcing the rules. They're private rules. Now, we're bound by the Constitution. We've got to, we can speak, we've got to be concerned about these things. And so we've got rules that allow those signs. The ACC can come pull in residential zones, you're allowed to have real estate signs, and that's it. And in commercial zones, you can do more than that. And when I say zone, I'm talking about their private zoning. I'm not talking about our city zoning, to make it even more confusing.
It's just like it's Cooper and ACC, the big bad man, we're not even going to try to do something about it.
Well, we can't change their rule.
I'm not saying we can't change the rules, but the first word out of everybody's mouth is they're going to take us to court. Well, let's take a test case and see.
They're not going to take us to court.
We're going to take the person to court. You got to find the right person who's willing to, take the heat.
I'm not that person.
Or at least stick his neck up and see, but we don't even know how they would go. Of course, you talk to them, it's like talk to that sign, but that's neither here nor there either. They're not enforcing according to what they even set up. It's either all or nothing instead of, I want one from column A and two from column B, and I want that one over there.
If we were as arbitrary as some other organizations in this town, we'd be sued every day, all day long. We cannot.
Okay.
And I say that because they can be, and they have been.
Yeah.
And one of the great
I know they come
challenges-
after people, don't get me wrong, I know that.
One of the challenges that I deal with, and that I think our staff deals with, is the fact that we hold them some rules. We can't just say, hey, it's okay, don't worry about it. That's not been the history of Bella Vista for decades. And getting people to switch that mindset is one of the greatest challenges we have in anything we do.
Well, half the people can't even tell the difference between us and them anyhow. I just
Oh,
thought I'd throw that out there.
yeah. Would the city have any liability if we said, yes, let's change this, and someone got sued? We would have, so the homeowner could be like, well, you said it was okay. Okay,
I'm not saying it's okay, it's not outlawing.
okay.
But like I said before, regardless
Oh, yeah.
of the ACC, whether they exist or whether they do not exist, there is not any stomach for this or support for this from the community at large. If you would put this to a vote of the residents on a ballot, it would go down in flames, big time.
Based on what I saw, that would be accurate.
The example is really the chicken thing, is that I have people that I know in the city that live in POA property that have chickens, right? They like their homegrown eggs, and so they have chickens. Well, it's okay by the city code, and in one case, they called the ACC and said, hey, is it okay to have chickens? And the ACC said, no, can't have chickens. And they came and made them take them away.
This is I don't mean to shock anybody, but we live in a largely privately developed, covenanted controlled community.
Right, yeah.
I can't believe anybody's particularly surprised by the fact that there are rules related to that.
Yeah.
And most of people aren't.
Yeah.
Most people.
Okay, let's move on to the next item. Reorganizing citizen input section of meeting based on agenda items.
That's me again, sorry. Larry Kelly at the last meeting, a public comment, has something that really interests me, in that having, instead of it just being all at the top of the meeting, if a citizen had something to talk about and it was about parking, they could sign up to speak at that section and that'd be their time to speak. If they didn't have anything that was on the agenda, they could speak in the open forum section if it was just something they wanted to talk about or get off their chest or mention. I think it's interesting. I like the idea that it keeps those comments for or against any item really just with the actual issue, so you don't get lost. But I also understand that it could cause maybe even greater length in meetings and cause me other issues. So I just wanted to kind of see what everyone else thought about his suggestion.
I guess one thought is that other cities in our northwest Arkansas area do business differently than we do, where we have input at the beginning of the meeting, There are some that allow input as the subject is brought forward, and I think you have to sign up for it, and we could do a little bit of survey. I don't know if that's easy to do with the clerk's system or not, to do a survey of the clerks up here,
Are you talking about through the AML?
how they take public input at formal council meetings.
You could do it, but I probably do it for Northwest Arkansas, but I could certainly do it for the whole state easier.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
And we can look at other cities of our size as well, if you do it across the state, because there are others that are large like us, that are not Little Rock as an example, but are large enough that have substantial populations that.
It really has been, I know up until just a few years ago, Bentonville had no public comment during council meetings at all. They have modified that rule system. Having had some experience working at Fayetteville, I'm familiar with their process, and they have, personal opinion, an overabundance of public comment on every item. And they've had some very hot topics down there. They've gone to 3 or 4 in the morning with meetings. And my personal view on that was that the council meeting is for the council members to debate. And it turned out into the public is engaging in the debate more than the council members are engaging in the debate. And certainly information from the public and opinion from the public is important. But you need to hold your authority close, because it is your job to debate and make these decisions. So to me, I think there's some balance in between those things.
In your time
It's
in,
not necessarily what we're doing now is not what we have to do, but
in your time in Fayetteville, were citizens relegated to like one, like, hey, you can speak, but pick a topic to speak on?
no.
Or they could sign up for,
They can speak to every item on the agenda.
okay,
So item 1 is ordinance amending rezoning, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, we're going to take public comment, so John Doe speaks on that one. Then they get through, and there's really no time limit on it.
yeah, I know, I've watched several.
It's sort of open-ended, except you get one turn. And then they vote, then the council will do its thing, the vote, go to the next item. And John Doe comes back up and says, you can have someone speak on every item on the agenda.
Okay.
I have
What
a,
that turns into, instead of getting your 2 minutes, 3 minutes to speak,
yeah, that's really bad.
going back through and getting quite the,
I have a couple thoughts on this. The first one is, to my knowledge, Mr. Kelly does not live in Bella Vista.
Yes, I did.
No, I'm talking about Larry Kelly.
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh, did he move?
yeah,
Oh, he did?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this would be an interesting thought experiment. I'd like to have a regular citizen go to Bentonville and get up at their meeting and say, hi, I'm from Bella Vista, and I think you should run your meeting such and such a way, and see how far you get. Not very.
What happened in Fayetteville was they had a lot of out-of-towners speak on their controversial equal rights ordinance, and there were people that were from outside Fayetteville that would come and speak. They changed the rule to prioritize Fayetteville citizens first, and then if you were outside of Fayetteville, you had to speak after that. That was how they dealt with that. But they did change the rule.
Well, I was at a Benton County meeting, and there was a number of people from Fayetteville weighing in on an issue, which I found quite interesting, since it wasn't even their county, but whatever. Anyway, yeah.
For now.
and I like to see like how other cities do, how they run it, and how, if it's successful for them, is it agreeable, average like meeting length? Like, are they having these marathon meetings? 'Cause I've watched several from Fayetteville when I lived there, and you'd go to sleep because they'd still be going.
You can survey the clerk for each of the communities up here, but I think you'll find that the predominance is that they do it like we do it, where everybody gets to do an input on whatever subject they want to speak on.
Absolutely.
Before the meeting begins. You have the input when you come to that item on your agenda, and you take their thoughts.
Okay.
So,
I think the way we're doing it works
it's
just fine right now. Everybody, gets their comment, and if you want to respond to it at that particular time, you can, or you can reserve the time for when the actual ordinance or resolution comes up.
Perfect. Yeah.
And otherwise, if we, open it up, our meetings could be incredibly long, maybe not for a good reason.
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
I mean, I'm all for public comment. I have no issue with it at all.
Absolutely.
Now, I've been accused of having an issue with it, and I don't, but, you know, so I think the way we're doing it right now works just fine.
That's a good thing.
So that's the end of the agenda. Does anybody have anything else? Okay. In that case, we're adjourned.
Right after the roof falls in.
Yeah, there you go.